Hello, welcome back, everybody. This is episode 18 of the Progressive Democrats of Howard County podcast. I am the president of the Progressive Democrats of Howard County, as well as the co-host of the podcast. My name is Jake Burdett. I'm joined by my co-host, Hiruy. How you doing today, Hiruy?
Hey, Jake. Hi, everybody. So, Jake, it seems like it was yesterday that we had our last podcast.
Yes. Long time no see, Hiruy. We're back at it again, and with a particularly important episode tonight. And as people are probably aware, June, it is Pride Month, and I actually feel bad that we're getting this out just at the very end of Pride Month. But I guess better late than never. But we want to touch on what's a very sensitive issue locally and nationally, and that is LGBTQ plus rights, discrimination, equity, and how sort of that is playing out here in Howard County, and particularly in the school system. So we've got a couple people that we're going to be speaking to on this episode. First, Suzi Gerb, who has been a teacher in the Howard County public school system for quite some time now. She's going to talk about her experience and how she's seen the county's approach to these issues sort of evolve over time. And then and then the second half of the episode, we are going to be speaking to both Jay and Jen Russalon. Jen, who's also a HCPSS educator, I believe, and Jay, who himself is a young student who has sort of been a victim and on the receiving end of some of this discrimination. He's been quite vocal about that, testifying at different hearings and whatnot in the county. So we're gonna sort of hear from people who have been working on these issues for years now, and then seeing what progress has been made and what still needs to be done. So with no further ado, welcome our first guest of the evening, Suzi Gerb. Suzi, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing very well. I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much.
Yes, no, definitely. Thank you, Suzi. And so, I gave a little bit of an intro, but if you want to just, give more of a detailed, intro to the audience of, who you are, what and sort of what's your connection to this issue.
Sure. Well, I'm an activist for the LGBTQ community. I'm also a teacher. I've taught in the Howard County schools. I'm just finishing my 21st year. But I'm also a member of CARI, which is Community Allies of Rainbow Youth, and on the steering committee of Howard County PFLAG, which is an advocacy organization for families of LGBTQ people. And I'm a writer and an educator, and I do go around and speak about LGBT issues, and lately and mostly about young people and the issues faced by young people. I should say, before we get started, though I am a teacher, I'm not speaking on behalf of the school system. And though I'm a member of CARI and a member of PFLAG Howard County, I'm not speaking on behalf of those folks either. Everything I say here is my own stuff.
Thanks, Suzi, for that introduction. It's good to meet you virtually, and congrats on completing your 21st year as an educator. It's one of the it's a very important it's a very important role, needless to say, but it's a difficult role too. So I admire educators. My dad is a teacher. He's a professor, so I admire their role. My grandfather is an educator too. We're in this county over the past, over the years. How has the county's approach, including the school systems, and the handling of LGBTQ plus issues changed over time?
Well, great question. This is, I can speak from at least as far back as 2001, which is my first year teaching. For my first 17 years as a teacher in this school system, I received absolutely no training at all pertaining to how to support LGBTQ students. So I would say that's probably true for most of the teachers. I can't speak for anyone but myself, but I believe that most places did not have any training like that. So if during those years, if Howard County was a welcoming and affirming place for its LGBTQ students, it was through no action of the school system. It was purely because individual teachers took it upon themselves to be there for their students, as I did. I'm the sponsor for the Sexuality and Gender Alliance, which is a group of LGBT students and their allies that get together after school. But those are clubs that the school hasn't encouraged us to form. The students just formed it, and tried to find a staff member. So I think that things began to change shortly after Superintendent Materano took over. And we started having meetings with him. Initially, it was the folks from the PFLAG chapter were having meetings with him. Then after Carrie got formed, the Carrie group started also meeting with him. And since I'm on both, I've been in both sets of meetings. And initially, that very first year, I think there was a lot of listening, and a lot of us expressing our frustration that there really hasn't been a lot of action from the school system on LGBTQ issues. And at some point, he hired I guess it would be called a director of diversity, equity, and inclusion, whose job it was to make sure that all students feel welcome, all students feel included, all students are supported to the best of the school system's ability. And I think so that now we had a dedicated office of people whose job it was to look at marginalized folks like LGBTQ plus students, and to try to make sure that the school system does the best for them that it can. And even so, for another year or so, I think we really struggled. I think it was really hard to move forward. There were so many other issues. And then the pandemic came along, and then all of a sudden everybody's attention was paid to, how can we do virtual learning? So I think it wasn't until after the pandemic began to be managed that things really started changing in a big way. And one of the things that we saw the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion group do is they formed a LGBTQ advisory group. And this was a group of several dozen members of both the student community, the parent community, the staff community, and then other interested people from around the county. And we got together 4 times a year and talked about how we can improve conditions for LGBTQ students. And we formed several different subcommittees at the suggestion of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion people. For example, there's a subcommittee on curriculum inclusion that's looking at our LGBTQ figures and literary works and historical and scientific information being included in the appropriate curriculums of those subject areas. The area that I'm involved in is a staff training group where we look into, all right, is the staff being trained in all the ways that it should be trained? And once that effort started, I really saw things start to improve. And to the point that this past school year, the 2021-2022 school year, they actually rolled out a series of 4 professional development opportunities that actually, I say opportunities, but all staff were required to take part in them to help us understand what the what life was like for LGBTQ students and how to support them, and how to make our schools the most welcoming place that they are. The other thing that they did starting the 2021-2022 school year was every school had a position called a rainbow representative. And these were staff members whose job it was, and we were actually given, and I'm the rainbow representative for my particular school. We were actually paid for the time outside of school, because these meetings were after school, to meet and to listen to what's going on around the school system that has to do with LGBTQ students, and then go back to our schools and report back to our staff saying, here's what's happening, here's what you need to know. And then finally, the most impressive thing I think that the school system has done, starting 2 years ago, it might have been 3 years ago, starting some years ago, there was a staff member at Hammond High School who wanted to hold a conference for all of the LGBTQ students in the school system. And she got the go-ahead to do that. And it was actually a very impressive conference. Unfortunately, it fell victim to the pandemic, and it had to happen online. And I was just so impressed with how they brought it online. But the school system supported it. I believe, I don't know this for sure, but I think the school system gave the staff members some money to help put it together. I hope they did, because it's certainly our students deserve that. So I think that was in 2020. We did another one in 2021 that was every bit as good, but probably a bit bigger, because we got more people coming to it. And then, not to want to be outdone, this past school year, they organized an entire week of Pride activities to bring out the LGBT students, to show them that they are welcome, that they are appreciated by the school system, to help them meet each other and get together. There was an entire week of these activities that just finished a few weeks back. And I think that just shows us kind of how far the school system has come from really nothing at all for 17 years to really being in touch with the needs. Now, are we there yet? No, there's a long way to go. I mean, I sat in on a call last night by the state superintendent of schools, and they had he was listening to stories from students of some of the things that they were enduring in their school system. And there were students from Howard County who spoke up and had not necessarily happy stories to tell. So I don't think we're there yet, but it's certainly worlds better than it was my first, decade plus on the job.
Yeah, no, it sounds like in the last 4 years or so, there has been, not the complete progress that we want to see, but certainly advancements, at least acknowledgements and clear efforts being made to acknowledge the existence of these people and the problems that they're going through, and giving open forums to discuss it and propose solutions. Sounds like some of them have even started to be implemented. So with some of that progress being made recently, I understand that there's been some sort of a backlash against this from certain segments locally. So could you please, describe what that backlash effect has kind of looked like? And then also, how much of that backlash do you think stems from the advancements that have been made locally? And how much do you think is just, reflective of a larger trend that we're kind of seeing happen nationally, with the, don't say gay bills in Florida and other states. And, this is, at least from my perspective, this does seem to be sort of a top-down effort from the right in this country. So what does that look like locally?
Well, and I have to caveat with this. I'm not an expert on the local hate groups and the local organizations that have been pushing back against the efforts of the school system to be welcoming for LGBTQ people. But I certainly have seen the web pages that they put up, and I certainly have read the posts that they put up. And so I kind of, have an idea of what they're about. I guess it started last school year with an effort to target a few of the books that were on the shelves of high school libraries. So these are shelves, high school libraries. Middle school students would not be coming across these books. But these books were certainly one book in particular, which is the book Gender Queer by Maya Kobe, is considered a book by many students the way that they help learn about their identity. It's a memoir, it's a graphic novel, an illustrated memoir by this author about how they discovered who they were, how they discovered their gender, and how they interact, how they, as their gender, began to interact with the world. And included in it is a number of, a sampling of the author's sexual thoughts, which is not uncommon, right? This is a teenage memoir. Teenagers have sexual thoughts; they just do. That's the way teenagers are. That's the way we all were when we were teenagers. And so it was in that respect, it was a very honest memoir of this person's experience. And some of these groups began targeting them. I think the first thing that would happen was that there was a resolution in our actually own school board, a resolution that did not pass, which was to have our lawyer, the school system lawyer, review the books to see whether or not they were pornographic. I mean, believe me, this was merely a portrayal of a young person's sexual thoughts. In no way was this pornographic. But it, it was an attempt at smearing this book. Fortunately, that by narrowest of margins, that failed in our Board of Education. When that failed, the group of people who were trying to get the book banned, they challenged the book, which then is the process of how that works. And they also, from what I heard, I wasn't there when it happened, but they went to the police department and they accused the school system of exposing children to pornography, which is absolutely ludicrous. I have to say, yes, the book did have sections about sexuality, and I can imagine somebody objecting to them, just as I can imagine somebody objecting to the sort of extreme violence that you find in Shakespeare plays. That doesn't mean that we clear Shakespeare plays off the shelf. It means that we teach them in the upper levels of high school when students are mature enough to understand, and the same thing's true with these books. So those books cleared the review. Thank heaven. They were not removed from the library. They're still there for students to look at. But there, school board meetings, you very often hear people coming in and challenging books. Always seems to be the books that have to do with LGBT experiences. Doesn't ever seem to be any other kind of book, even though there's, just about any book that has to do with adolescent coming of age is going to have a sexual component to it, because adolescents come of age sexually. That's what they do. And so, but it seems only that the books about the queer experience or other marginalized groups that seem to be targeted. And then with Pride Week approaching, there's been kind of a step up on the rhetoric from the web pages that I've been seeing, where they've actually used words like grooming. They've used words like indoctrination to describe the efforts that the school system has made to help LGBTQ students feel supported. And this is all very pertinent to the school board race, because, like I told you about that resolution to cast suspicion on the book Genderqueer. That just failed by the narrowest of margins. There was an abstention that if it hadn't been an abstention, it would have passed. So it was not, it was definitely not safe ruling, something it could have gone either way. And there are 2 openings on the school board. So it very well could change. It very well could be the case that the next school board could be hostile. And we could see not only some of these books have suspicion cast on them, but I mean, there are very powerful policy changes that could be made. I mean, all of the improvements and progress that I've talked about, all of that could be undone if we had a hostile school board. And it does appear like there are several members of the school board that these groups are supporting. And from what I've seen, by the number of ads that they've run and the number of signs they seem to have available to them, they're very well funded. Now, I have not looked at their funding profile, so I can't say, are they being funded by, concerned people in Howard County who've reached deep into their pockets, or are they being funded by outside money? I certainly know there has been talk about school board races elsewhere that have been funded by outside money, that groups target particular school boards and say, we think our money will make a difference here. Our money might actually be able to change the policies of the school system to make them more hostile to LGBTQ students. I don't know anybody who would want more hostile policies to LGBTQ students. I mean, if you ever meet them, you ever spend time with them, these are the most precious souls. And all they want is to have the same education that they deserve, that every person who isn't LGBTQ takes for granted. That's all they want. And so why somebody, would want to make the environment for these students more hostile, that I cannot fathom. But it does seem like that is on the agenda for some of these groups.
Absolutely, Suzi. I wholeheartedly agree. Just wanted to say first that I'm glad that this progress or these initiatives that were started 4 years ago are coinciding with what I think is perhaps this national movement to rile people up based on this issue. Because if that initiative was not there, then I think perhaps students and teachers would be in worse position to be able to handle that. So I'm definitely glad about that. The thing is, clearly this is not about books, right? Because first of all, this is in the library. It's not, you have the freedom to go into the library and pick a book that you want. So clearly, it's not about some sort of, coercion to force someone to. It's not required reading. By the way, I think that to be more inclusive, the schools should have certain required, reading about understanding, others, that are, people that are not like them, people that are there, so there should be some component there. On the one hand, there's a national movement that riles people up when saying, we have First Amendment rights, and then on the other hand, there's this attempt to tamp that down. So there's another question that I think I know Jake will ask, but I want to know, just maybe sort of as we speak here, maybe even brainstorm, what can individuals, what can we do to combat that? Because we know this is not a good faith argument. And we know that the people who hold these positions, the ones who are stoking the fear, they really don't care about this. It's for power. But how do we ensure that the people who fall prey to them, or like just this our society does how do we mitigate that effort from taking hold through this I would say very cynical movement?
Well, the easiest answer to that question is research the Board of Education candidates that you're planning on voting for and find out how do they feel about LGBTQ issues. And to that end, the group called CARI, Community Allies of Rainbow Youth, they actually sent a questionnaire out to every one of the Board of Education members, and 5 out of the 8 candidates responded to it. And those responses, the 5 responses that CARI received, they're all up on CARI's website. You can just read them. Anybody can read them and read what did the candidates actually say about their commitment to supporting LGBTQ students. And so that's the first thing they can do is, number one, educate yourself on what do the people you're voting for actually think about the issue. And number two, go out and vote. Go out and vote according to what you know. And then also, if you find anything else out, tell your friends, right? Tell other people, hey, who are you voting for in the school board election? Because I think you really check out that CARI questionnaire and see what those candidates really say. So encourage other people, your friends, your acquaintances. If you're a member of an organization, if you're at a school, talk to the people at your school, talk to the people at your place of worship, talk to people at your place of employ if that's allowed under the rules. Basically tell other people, hey, think about who you're going to vote, and here's how you can find out how they feel about LGBTQ issues. So I would say those are the strongest things that you can do to actually help the situation.
Yes, absolutely. And, thank you, Suzi, and, thank you to CARI and, any other groups who have put those types of resources out there to, make these candidates go on the record and also give resources to voters to help them sort of decipher those answers. Because as we all know, politicians don't always say things in the most direct way. So that's certainly helpful. And, I had one other question I was going to ask that was actually about, Board of Ed races, but you kind of already touched on, why it is important to follow this stuff if you care about this issue, because, they are voting directly on what content is being allowed or what content needs to be censored. And as we do see that this is a targeted thing, they're selectively going after LGBTQ plus content or, critical race or whatever the buzzwords that they want to use are. But one last comment / question, if you want to touch on it, you can. You don't have to. And also I'll include, before I get to that, Progressive Democrats of Howard County have we have our club voted to endorse both Meg Ricks and Julie Hotop, who at least from my reading of CARI's questionnaire seem to have a pretty good grasp of these issues, and so I would personally recommend people to check their responses out, as well as all the other candidates who responded as well. But so with that being said, yes.
Jake, if I may, just before you make the next point, I wanted to second the point about the PDHC endorsements about with Meg Ricks and Julie Hotop, and I did review the CARI questionnaire, which was very helpful in helping me identify who at least just who I thought would be really good on LGBTQ plus issues. So I just wanted to reinforce that, and just also add that another component to me, at least is who would be independent and be able to make a determination on for example, on the just to step back, Suzi, you mentioned earlier you mentioned you hoped that the person who organized that webinar or the meeting received money for her for her efforts to put that together. And I really think one of the components to making sure that there's enough resources available to increase the education, to provide the support system, is I think ensuring that there is enough money to have that. And the budget request every year is an important component of that. And I think they will do a good job on that too. So I'm sorry, Jake. So go ahead with your question, but wanted to point that out.
Yeah. No, I mean, what I was going to say is kind of similar, just in like, obviously, yes, Board of Ed has, a ton of control over these issues, but, it is a primary election and there are a lot of seats up for election, not just Board of Ed. There's also county council, county executive up. And I think it's important that people, just like with the Board of Ed candidates, do their research, because when it comes to county council who might not be dealing as much with curriculum or whatnot, but when we talk about solutions to sort of solving some of these inequities or eliminating some of these inequities, sometimes it is as simple as just calling a meeting and giving those people a space to talk about their issues and talk about the solutions. But a lot of the solutions might cost a lot of money. It might require hiring additional staff. It might require investing in additional healthcare resources. And just because there's a price tag on these solutions absolutely does not mean that we should not pursue them, but it means that we're going to have to, either cut from the budget, or what I would prefer is just make the entities in the county who have not been paying their fair share for a very long time pay their fair share, so that we have the funding for these incredibly necessary solutions. So, I make that point to say you might even have sometimes candidates who will say all the right things and they'll claim, to be an ally, but they also have to vote that way and, literally put their money where their mouth is. So, look not only what the candidates say, but what they do. Are they really voting with those communities, and not just for Board of Ed, but for county council and county exec? Now, if you want to touch on that, Suzi, you're welcome to, but you don't have to. If you'd like, we could end it there. If you'd like.
Well, I mean, sure. And I wanted to address one of the things that Hiruy said, which is that they are actually, the budget has actually been approved to hire somebody whose job is specifically to attend to the needs of LGBTQ students. And that's a new thing. They didn't have that before. So that is an area where having more in the budget would, actually benefits the students. I mean, I didn't mention it before because it's something that hasn't happened yet. They haven't hired that person yet. But the approval for the position happened. And to talk about the other races, I haven't talked too much about the other races, just because most of the time I think people are pretty clued in. For example, the council races, they know who their council person is. They know who's running against their council. They may probably even know why that person's running against them. But the Board of Education is usually a slate of people they've never heard of. And so it's a particular challenge to try to sort through who would be the right candidate.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's also where like these extremist forces seem to be targeting is Board of Ed. So well, thank you so much, Suzi, for coming on and explaining from your perspective, and for being an ally for so long. And it sounds like LGBTQ plus students didn't have somebody to go to at their school unless there was somebody like you who was willing to volunteer and be that person. So thank you to Suzi for that. And with no further ado, we're now going to transition over to our next set of guests to talk about this issue from a slightly different perspective. And that is Jay and Jay's mother, Jen Ruslan. And I'm gonna let them both, introduce themselves more fully. But as I said at the beginning, Jen herself is also educator in the county, and Jay has been quite vocal testifying on these issues. So Jen, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jen Ruslan. Thank you for inviting us here. I am entering my 25th year in Howard County as an educator, and am also obviously a parent of Jay and another student in Howard County in elementary school. So my passion lies with not just my children, but all children, and making sure that everybody feels included and welcomed in the classrooms that they walk into.
Awesome, thank you. And Jay.
Hi, I'm Jay. I'm Jen's son or child. I am a student in Howard County and am going into 8th grade. And yeah, like Jake has said, I've been pretty vocal about my experience with being a trans student, and just kind of what my life is like and just my opinions on everything that has been going on lately.
Well, Jay and Jen, nice to meet you both. We just had Suzi Gerb, who provided some of the context in terms of the historically, how has it been in Howard County and some of the changes that have taken place, and we also discussed the over the past 3 or 4 years, some of the of course it didn't start there, but there's more amped up backlash that's been taking place. We've seen it nationally, different jurisdictions. For example, Loudoun County is one example that was from last year or the day before or the year before. So Jay, for how has this this backlash effect that that we have described, how has from your perspective, you've experienced it firsthand. Can you describe it in to us in some detail here?
Yeah, sure. It's kind of like a waking fear that I experience every day, where I'm like, Carroll County just, banned pride flags for being too political. And I'm like, is my county next? Thankfully, I know Dr. Marano. I know, he wouldn't let that kind of stuff slide. He recognizes how important it is for queer youth to feel understood, valued, and loved as, they should be. But it still is this fear of like, what if the people who are against me and are against me just trying to live my life being as authentic to myself as I can be, what if they win? And it's really upsetting to have to think that way, because I like to try and keep my head up. I like to try and stay positive, but everything that's been going on, it's very difficult to do that, because some of my worst fears have been confirmed for people in other counties, for other people in different states. And some of this does spill into school. The fact that, we still have teachers who are sort of not very educated when it comes to this stuff, or we have students who might hear ignorance at home that they get from their own parents, and then they come to school and like repeat it back to me. It just all kind of like spills over. It's an endless cycle that I feel like we should stop at this point.
Thanks, Jay. I heard the very compelling testimony that you gave before, at the Board of Education. So we'll include that, at this point, in our video, we'll include that clip here, so a viewer can get a chance to take a listen.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jay Ruslan. I'm in 7th grade at a Western Howard County school. My pronouns are he, him, and they, them, and I'm transgender. Thank you for allowing me to speak here and for recognizing Pride Month in the school system. Even more gratitude towards my principal for helping me find a bathroom I'm comfortable using, and my teachers who respect my name change and pronouns. These are things that cisgender people don't have to stress about, and out of everything I deal with, these are the smallest. I grew up in a cisgender heterosexual household. I have a younger brother and a mom and a dad. I was never exposed to any type of LGBTQ media or representation. In fact, I only knew 2 queer people. I moved to a conservative area in 4th grade. I didn't come out until the end of 6th grade, although I'd felt this way for as long as I can remember. Despite my lack of queer education and the absence of any LGBTQ representation in my life, I am unapologetically queer. Their whispers and ignorant glares are background noise to me by now, and while I've grown so used to it, I still hear every single word they say. Conversations filled with intentional and obvious homophobia, discussions that include mocking a trans individual. They talk about me, and if it's not me, it doesn't matter, because everyone who isn't like them is lumped into a category of oddballs, weirdos, or snowflakes. I've been called the F-slur at school. I've had kids intentionally engage in harmful, transphobic rhetoric right in front of me, just to remind me that I'm different, and I look weird, and that my presence there is unwelcome. I'm a spectacle for them to gawk at, a freak show free of charge. My cautious, aloof walk in the hallways taken as invitation. These kids, the same ones who harass me or consider me an outcast, grew up the same way I did. Without enlightenment, without accurate, not offensive portrayal of queer people. We tiptoe around the word gay like it's the plague. We make kids think it's a bad word, something to be afraid of, something that's a threat. They've never been exposed to someone like me, someone who's too queer for my little town. And why don't we talk about people like me? If I'm so brave, so unique, so deserving of respect, wouldn't you want your kids to be like me? And my transness, my queerness, this can't be taught. I didn't learn this from anyone. If sexuality and gender can be taught and forced onto a person, then why aren't I and every other queer person queer? We don't want, or rather need, your kids to be like us. In fact, I wouldn't wish my experiences on anyone. The dysphoria and anguish I feel on a good day can be unbearable. The end goal isn't for cisgender and heterosexual people to be the minority, or for all of us to turn your kids gay. It's for the small population of queer kids to feel supported, understood, and represented. It's for the kids who might know somebody who's LGBTQ and want to acknowledge and comprehend them. And it's for the non-queer kids so that they don't perceive us as a foreign threat, but as people who are not all that different from them. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, and sort of touching on that testimony, which very courageous and admirable for you to be doing something like that at that young of an age. And that's actually kind of what I want to ask about is one, I think Hiruy mentioned it was a Board of Education meeting, but what was the context of that meeting that you were testifying at, and what made you decide, you know what, this is important and I need to speak on this. It might make me the target of more, negative attention or bullying, but what made you decide that, that was worth the risk and, was important enough to do that?
So actually, funny enough, my mom was the one who brought up the meeting to me. Up until I, went to the Board of Ed meeting and spoke there, I didn't really know that public forums were a thing at Board of Ed meetings. I had heard of all the issues going on. And if it hadn't been for all those outside factors and my mom encouraging me to do it, I don't think I would have done it. The context of the meeting was, there was a lot of backlash being, it was like Pride Month, like Pride Week was coming up. Carroll County had just banned pride flags. All of these there was a lot of talk about books being banned. And, I had, experienced a couple of, not super great incidents of harassment like beforehand. And I was just like, enough's enough. I've been quiet for long enough. It's probably time for me to say something. And I'm really glad I did. It opened up a lot of opportunities for me. And not only that, but I feel like I did a very good job representing my community and people like me to the best of my abilities.
Jay, I totally agree. I thought it was a very compelling testimony. I have from a parent perspective, I would say, I have two children, and they're at a young age, but whenever I'm always trying to find different ways not to see them get hurt, or just trying to find different ways to protect them. And so I'm wondering, Jennifer, when you it's hearing that testimony, as a parent, I'm sure you had some reaction. So if you would like to share, would you tell us a little bit about that?
I, of course, was extremely proud of my child for taking the chance and the opportunity to put themselves out there. I think in our family, it's talked about ad nauseum. So I felt like this would be a great opportunity for the community to see what they have to say. And Jay is a great advocate for their community. I can't think of anyone better. So it was even more touching afterwards when Dr. Martirano paused the meeting, or paused his presence in the meeting, because he wanted to speak to Jay afterwards. And that really touched me, because not just as a parent, but as an educator, that he cared enough to say, I need to walk away from the important meeting that's happening right now, because I need to hear more from this very important person, even though they're 13. And that meant a lot to me, because oftentimes I'm at my desk or in my classroom, and you just wonder about the people who are making these decisions for you. And so it was nice to hear someone who's willing to advocate for your child, and people who just deserve to be seen as everyone else, really.
Yeah, and touching on what both of you mentioned. You said, Jen, that this is very much talked about in your family. I imagine in a supportive way, of course, and that's really fortunate that Jay has that sort of support system at home, and he doesn't have to feel afraid of being who they are at home. And I'm sure that makes things a little bit easier to sort of tolerate. But I think the sad reality is that not all LGBTQ plus youth do have a supportive family. So I don't think we can just rely on LGBTQ plus youth getting that support at home. Obviously that's great if they have it, but what can and I'd like to hear both Jen's answer as a parent and Jay's answer as a student still in the school system. What could the school system or the county government do to better provide support for students like Jay, who do or do not have that support system at home, to sort of normalize this stuff? Because I think that's a lot of what Jay's testimony was touching on.
Yeah, and I think Suzi brings perspective that I didn't have. Jay being 13, this has been somewhat of a shorter but longer process. It depends on when you ask me, but 3 years ago, would I have thought I would be having this conversation with you? No. So I wasn't privy to the history, but now that it affects me personally and really professionally, I've made it my mission to help the students like Jay, but who might not have the support at home. And so, like Suzi, I am the rainbow rep at my school, and I'm trying to create opportunities for students to feel where they have a voice and they feel welcomed. And just working on trying to get more opportunities for students to be able to share who they are and not feel ashamed. In terms of what the county can be doing, I mean, a huge step is that they created that liaison position that Suzi spoke of, that's going to be great, but that's one person for the whole entire county. I actually almost feel like we need one for every school. Because I even see at the elementary level how teachers shy away from addressing many bullying kind of situations because they don't know how to touch it. It's almost like taboo, so they don't say anything, and then that perpetuates it so that a child like Jay going to middle school is dealing with what they're dealing with. Whereas if we were just to kind of meet this head on at a young age, even starting at kindergarten, and then Jay wouldn't be dealing with what they're dealing with now.
Yeah, and Jay, if you want to, give your perspective as well, on what more could the county and school system do to sort of normalize this stuff and give support to people in your community.
I completely agree with everything my mom said. Part of me thinks and wonders sometimes, if I had learned about this kind of stuff when I was younger, maybe I would have been out sooner than like last year. Maybe I would have realized, oh, hey, I'm like trans and queer, like earlier than I did, because I've always felt this way. It wasn't like one day or I woke up and I was just like, you know what, I feel like I want to go through a life of harassment and discrimination. It's not like, that's not like, it wasn't like a conscious decision that I made. And especially with my parents, even, I feel like a large part of the misunderstanding and fear that comes from this is the fact that people think that this kind of stuff can be taught. As I said in my testimony, I grew up knowing like two queer people. They were both lesbians. And I never even, it's not like my parents ever sat down with me and said, like, those are gay people, Like, I didn't think anything was different about it. I had never met like a trans person in my life. Queer stuff was not talked about at my house, like, at all. It's not that my parents weren't supportive. It's just that nobody thought to talk about it, Nobody was really out to us. And our world wasn't big enough for us to really see it and see that it was something that would affect us later on in life. And because this kind of stuff can't be taught, let's educate other people about, queer people's lives at school, like, even just saying like, hey, gay people exist, hey, trans people exist, like, respect them, please, because they're also humans and they are very much worthy of respect. Even that goes a long way, especially when you're young. And I think another, like, myth about queer education is that we're, coming out teaching kids about like explicit, like, queer stuff, which isn't true at all, especially not with kindergartners. I don't know where the like rhetoric comes from that we are grooming like 6-year-olds and teaching them to be like gay or trans. That's not what we're doing. And it's extremely frustrating and disheartening for me to see stuff like that being shared and being thought of, because I know for me, if somebody had at least included queer people in health education, or if I had read about queer people in books or seen them in media, I would be a completely different person than I am today, in a very positive way. I would know a lot more about myself. And for people who aren't queer, it would give them a chance to understand a bit more about me and people who are like me.
Jay says it best at home when they say, we were never too young to learn about heterosexual relationships. And it's so true. It's like, I don't know what else to say to that, but it's spot on.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think, I think there's this, the only way I can describe it is cognitive, dissonance. There's just this, it's cognitive dissonance, and it's also, power, right? So there's a dominant part of society that's able to exercise that power, and dictate what everybody and how everybody else should behave. That's of course the main. I think that plays a huge role. I don't. Maybe people would disagree with me on this, but I don't know if it's how easy it is to change people's hearts and minds. But I think, as a society, we can require certain things in our public spaces, right? So people can't bully other people. Like, that's just a basic, if you want to coexist, you can't bully other people. So you can have those sets of rules there. And then if you're going to interact with, children and, with members of the public, you have to have certain required training. That's, another set of requirement that we can have. And then, we can require, Jennifer, as you mentioned, people train liaisons to be in each school. Where I'm leading with this is, these are also things that require money, right? These are things that require money. And then we also, and given the way that, how decisions are made, and I disagree with those decisions in terms of how they are prioritized, every year we're always dealing with this fixed pie, and these important programs are given the crumbs. I mean, that's basically what happens. So how do we ensure that the pie is big enough? Because the pie is big enough. Usually, the problem is, there are things that are being done misappropriated, that the crumbs are left. How do we ensure that the pie is big enough that these important programs, I would say the most important programs, have the money, the resources, so that, at the very least, when, in areas where, in forums where people have to interact, they're not, creating these kinds of terrible conditions for people like Jay. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think Suzi said it right when she said that we need to be really serious about this election, which is funny coming from me because I was never into politics at all, didn't think about it. I was just like, and then, now with just everything that's been going on, I really realized how I can no longer be passive, or not just my child, but all children are going to be treated in a way that I'm not okay with. That doesn't align with my thinking. So I think we all need to educate ourselves, just like Suzi said, and figure out what candidate aligns with our thoughts and the things that we want our children to become and we want our children to hear. I personally will be voting for Dan Neuberger for the Board of Ed candidate position. And I still have my work to be done about the other positions, because I know that funding does come, and it just no one has really come out at me yet to say yes. But I do feel like that Board of Ed position, though, is going to be huge, because if it could sway them one way or another, whether they're going to support Dr. Martirano and his mission for making sure all students are feeling included and feeling safe in their environment.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
And I really, really take that to heart, because I've always been somebody who has tried to advocate for what I believe in, what I think is right. And, I tend to go for people who are a lot like me. And if they're not like me, then they're preaching values and supporting things that affect me positively. And Mr. Neuberger, he's definitely he's such a great guy. And, everything that he stands for, I 100% agree with. And it helps out kids like me, a lot. And it's very disheartening and upsetting to see some of and not just him in particular, but people like him or people like my mom and rainbow reps, I've seen a lot of negative talk about them, to see them being framed as groomers or like pro indoctrination. It's like, what? We're teaching kids that it's okay to be who they are. Isn't that what we're supposed to be doing?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And real quick, the reason why, I think our membership decided not to endorse Dan is, and Dan, has given very good answers on LGBTQ plus issues. And I think it touches back to sort of what I referenced earlier of like, they're saying the right things, and Dan certainly does that. And then there's, doing the right things. And as we mentioned earlier, some of these solutions might require some serious funding. And that means we need elected officials who are going to do what's necessary to put pressure on the county executive and on the county council to get that necessary funding. And from my perspective, the reason why our school system has been so underfunded for so long in one of the wealthiest counties in the country has been because of sort of pay to play corruption and, corporations, industry donating large amounts to elected officials and in return doing their bidding. And in Howard County, it happens mainly with the developer lobby. And Dan Newberger, until right before he ran, he was the treasurer of a PAC that is very supportive of these sorts of shady relationships with developers. In fact, I was recruited to the board of this PAC at one point, and they told me that a big purpose of the PAC was so that they could accept developer money on behalf of candidates, so that candidates don't have to accept it directly. So Dan is one of those people that myself and I think others from our group are skeptical of. Like, yes, he's saying the right things, but is he really going to do it in office? And I hope I'm wrong about him. I hope if he gets elected that he does do what he says he's going to do. But that being said, yes, very good. He does have very good answers on those issues. And I'll let Hiruy touch on that too. But another point I wanted to make in regards to, what Jay was saying earlier about, maybe if they had taught this stuff in schools at a younger age, Jay could have even come to the realization about, their identity earlier in life. And, yes, obviously that would be helpful, but maybe you would not have come to that realization earlier, because everybody has these realizations at a different age. But nonetheless, let's think of the impact that introducing that stuff earlier on could have had on these people, on your classmates who are, bullying you every day and giving you a hard time, making your life a lot more difficult. And I think what a lot of that stems from is this concept of heteronormativity, and just anything that strays from that normal, quote unquote normal male female relationship is different, it's weird, it's foreign, it's to be mocked. And that's sort of just, how humans deal with things that are different from them. And that's the importance of introducing this stuff at an early age, so that these beliefs about what is and isn't normal don't get solidified too early. And then if people know when they're 5 years old that gay people exist or trans people exist, and then they go to then they meet a trans or gay person in school, it's not a big deal, because they know it's not a weird thing to, like, it's been introduced to them, it's been normalized. So and Ying Matties from Cary had suggested to me a while ago of creative ways that schools could introduce this, even things like, you have math word problems, you could introduce like gay people into that. You could, Dan and Todd have a wedding, and they have to get a suit that's $1,000, but they only make $700, and you do some sort of math word and you can just introduce it in ways as simple as that. So I wanted to make that point here. I think you messaged that you wanted to say something too.
Yeah,
I
but
wanted
before,
to say something.
yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Go. I was gonna let Jay and Jen to talk. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. Like, I think Jay has taught our family thankfully, because I've been able to pass it on to my students, that like, why do we have to put everything in such a box, right? Like, why does it have to be blue? Why does it have to be pink? Why do we have to have a name that is girl and a name that is boy? Like, just, and that has, to me, that has really nothing to do with gender or sexuality. It has everything to do with just not putting humans in boxes, because we shouldn't be in a box, right? And if we don't put people in boxes, then anyone who is outside the box will never be feel weird. It would be more like, oh my gosh, this is like the coolest human ever, because they're nothing like me and I want to get to know them better because they aren't like me. But we as humans, and even us as parents, feel like this strong push to get our kids to do what everybody else is doing. And I think it's really hard as a parent to step away from that and say, you know what? I'm good with my kid who's transgender and non-binary, and I'm good that they're identified differently than what we had originally, thought or planned. And that's okay, because they are living their best life. And honestly, I kind of don't know why anybody else cares what my child is or isn't, because it's not impacting them. So as an educator's perspective, I take that to my students and I just say, you be you. And I say that to Jay all the time, like, you be your authentic self, whatever that looks like, and don't let anyone step in your way, because ultimately you have one life to live and it's yours, and don't let anyone get in that path.
And something to add on to what you just said, coming back to the like boxes and stuff, personally, something that's really cool about language in general is that we do have the option to give ourselves labels so that we can, accurately represent our experiences to people, whether it be gender, sexuality, romantic orientation, or lack thereof. I think what I have an issue with, coming from somebody who is queer in almost every way imaginable, is when there aren't boxes that accurately represent how I feel or how I want to present myself or how I experience life or attraction or gender. There's nothing wrong with having boxes as long as everybody feels like they have a box that they can fit in. Or if people, they have the boxes laid out with them and they're like, I don't fit into any of these, and that's okay, that should be valid as well. I feel like everybody should be allowed to identify with whatever makes them feel like they are giving people an accurate representation of themselves. And yeah.
Jennifer, what you mentioned earlier, in terms of what happened to live and let live, like why does it bother you how my child is? I think that's people, we should definitely that should be that should be the underlying principle. Everybody should have that notion. So I wholeheartedly agree. And one thing that was mentioned about creating an opportunity for children even 5 years old to be to have this opportunity to learn about people who are different than them. I mean, I think I think it's fine. The challenge is this comes from home, right? So that's, to me, that's always where I go back to, is this comes from home. There's some orientation at home where there's this thing that's been taught that this person is bad because they're this person is bad because they're this. And it's I find that probably time would take care of that, as we get more and more this as we get more and more educated about this. I think time will take care of that. But in the meantime, I think we need the resources to require certain behavior, certain decorum when we're treating other people in public spaces, in schools, and you know, I go back to the resource question, and I'm not going to harp on any specific candidate, but what I think about when I think about, you know, how to pick a candidate is, are they going to succumb to political pressure from the power structure? You know, and over the past few years, I think, you know, the decline, my understanding is even the maintenance of effort that's been used as a benchmark to demonstrate that there's been adequate funding, even that has been, you know, over years, impacted in an adverse way, and that's declined. And one of the reasons that has declined is, I think, the people who held those positions in the BOE over the years have succumbed to political pressure from the power structure and not requested the necessary amount. I remember in 2019 when Dr. Marinaro requested, it was December of 2019, he requested a huge amount of money that the county needed, that the school system needed, and he received a lot of backlash from the power structure. They even started making videos with, one of the lead lobbyist for Howard Hughes, created a video and started spreading it on, online, in coordination with the power structure in Howard County. So, what I think about is, if, who is the candidate that will not succumb to that political pressure? And the ones who are not most likely not going to succumb is the ones who did not receive the support system to get elected, because they will likely not feel obligated to vote a certain way, or to lowball an ask that the county, that the school system has. So I just like to, that's at least, how I apply, that's like my main criteria on how I pick up a candidate. Having said that, if you wanted to, I'll give, Jay and Jen an opportunity to react, and then we can go to Jake.
If they have a reaction. I see Jen coming off.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I don't have a reaction other than, really, we just want what's best for all kids. So however that happens, I just want my child and other children to feel safe and secure at school, and to learn that it's okay to be different.
Absolutely. And I think I don't have any other questions, but I just have one last comment in reaction to what Jay said earlier and what Jen just touched on. And that is, all these quote unquote boxes that we put people in, whether it's, male, female, kind of in this context. But, basically the point I want to make is things like gender, things like race, we have to remember these are, at the end of the day, social constructs that were invented by humans. There's nothing scientific about it. These things are fluid and change over time. Our understandings of these concepts change over time. Irish people used to not be considered white. Jewish people used to not be considered white. Now, for the most part, we do consider these people white, and there is no scientific way to prove or disprove it. And it's because race and gender are completely made up concepts, again, not rooted in any actual science. And so our understanding of these things can change, and gender is absolutely part of that. And Jay says there's nothing wrong with there being boxes, as long as everybody has a box and everybody's comfortable with these boxes existing. And these boxes of male, female didn't exist until we as humanity decided to create this concept, and we can always create new boxes. So if there are no other comments, questions, or concerns, I think we can go ahead and close out this episode. Thank you again to Suzi Gerb and Jay and Jen Ruslan, and thank you to Carrie and PFLAG and any other LGBTQ plus allies in the county. Happy Pride Month, everybody. This has been episode 18 of the Progressive Democrats of Howard County podcast. Please, if you want to follow us on social media, become a dues-paying member, join our email list, et cetera, et cetera. Check out our link tree. It will have all of those links and more. It is linktr.ee/HOCO Progressives. Thank you, everybody, and do your homework before you vote. And we will see you all for episode 19. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for having me.
Yep.